Every one of you must fear his mother and his father, and you shall keep my Sabbaths. What's the connection between honoring parents, fearing parents, and Shabbat? What is Shabbat all about? Well, it's all about really time, right? When we recognize and we value Shabbat, it's God's way of saying, I've given you this much time, and I'm asking you to come together with me, and let's have a recharge, a reset. We all want kind of a vacation, a getaway, right? Well, you're going to get that today. You're going to get to hear from me. You're going to get to have fellowship with one another. You're going to get to eat good food and come together and have time. And time belongs to God. You know, if you think about it, it also teaches us about a principle of getting on a cycle of duty. What is Shabbat really about? Is it about not work, or is it about work? It's actually about both. If you think about it, because if you're going to take a day aside, and if you think about the Israelites and what they had to do in order to not go out and gather food in the field, what did they have to do? They had to be completely dependent upon God. They had to be completely dependent upon God. Said, you know, we're trusting you to provide for us on this. And so a part of Shabbat is that it points us to our uttermost need upon God. We stop looking at our own work, and we recognize God and his provision. And we take enjoyment and delight in the day, and it points us back to creation. And then it points us to redemption, because the first thing that God gave Israel as they came out of Egypt was, in Exodus 16, was the Shabbat. You see, the Israelites were enslaved and they couldn't serve God. They had to work for Pharaoh, and they had to work 7 days a week, and they had to work long hours. They couldn't have a time for God because they had to serve Pharaoh. And so each Shabbat we come together and we recognize the freedom that we have. Yeshua is the one that has set us free. The Yeshua is the one that has made us right with God. And as we look at the scriptures and we see that it talks about a time when all flesh shall come to worship before the Lord on Shabbat, it points us to the future that is coming as well. And that God is going to be the one that restores and does all things. And he makes all things new. But if you think about it too as well, in the commandment, but embedded in the commandment for Shabbat is what? 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, right? If you're going to get everything done, you got to have a work ethic, and if you're going to have this day off, you got to have a work ethic, and you got to make preparations. So I love it. For me, when I started trying to honor Shabbat, it was a kind of a good point of disciplinary action for me to help bring me into understanding a cycle. But nevertheless, go back to this issue of the value of women and the value that they have in the home and the value that they have in the business world too as well, and that the Torah gives women rights to own land, rights to be who they are. You think about Yeshua, it's interesting in the Gospels how many women served alongside Yeshua. Now, we don't see him putting them in top primary leadership positions of the apostolate, but they do serve alongside him significantly. That would be something that may not necessarily be as reportable amongst other Jewish schools of thought at that time. And so we see the value and the integrity that women have in the Torah. The mother is the point of strength in a child's life. But what does it ultimately really point us to? And when I think about the idea of Shabbat and the idea of parents right there embedded in the beginning, there's this holy society, there's this holy community, and we see what holiness looks like in Leviticus chapter 19 and 20. And it begins with the mother. It begins with the woman. It begins with the parents. And as parents, you are a reflection of God to your children. And your children are going to learn what God is like from simply looking at you. And I want to say this, though, about women in general. You know, the idea and the misappropriation, the misunderstanding of the Torah is that women are chattel and women are simply baby-producing machines. And that your role is to, somehow, just simply serve in the home and simply produce children, and that's kind of it. And that's a misappropriation, that's a misunderstanding of the Torah, of Scripture.